Hi guys, my name is Joanna and I decided to do this video because I do believe that this conversation may help others and may help guide them a little bit better in their life. And it's my first video, so I'm gonna try my best, and I'm also going to be answering certain questions that I have been asked many times. And the topic is going to be the age of the soul. And it is one of my favorite topics, just because it has helped me quite a bit in understanding the reasons why I connected with certain people and not others. We could also define it to be a little bit of that chemistry. So we really can't predict chemistry. So this is, I think, a reason why. And I think that it has to do with something that's beyond this physical realm. So I think that it has to do with something beyond our intellect and beyond our body or physical appearance. And I think it has to do with the age of your soul. So I'm going to give an explanation of what it is, and then I'm going to answer to certain questions around it. So your soul goes through many incarnations, which it decides to incarnate in these bodies, and it chooses the body and the circumstance, the scenario, in order to learn a certain lesson. So so the age of the soul has to do with how many of these lessons a soul has learned, and it just has to do with how much experience it went through. So that all souls are created at the same time, and all souls will then reunite with Source or God or one creator or whatever the terminology you want to use it. One soul isn't going to be better or worse than the other soul. So it's not like a soul that's had less experiences is less evolved than a soul that had more experiences. It just has to do with a soul maybe understanding certain things that another soul may not understand, because they still need to go through that process of learning that specific lesson. And so Michael Newton, in his book Journey of Souls, which I recommend, it goes more into detail of the different levels of soul. So he says that there's the beginner soul, which is also defined to be a young soul, and it is divided into level 1 and level 2, which I'll get into later on. The intermediate soul, which is also defined to be a mid-third density. So young soul, beginner soul, early third density, mid-third density, which is also an intermediate soul, and then the advanced soul, which is the late third density. And then if we get into the law of one, so the raw material, then we get into the wanderers, which are practically of a higher density. So they aren't here primarily to learn lessons like these other souls, but they're here primarily to raise consciousness. It does not mean, obviously, that they won't be learning lessons. It just means that that's not their primary reason of existing. The whole purpose of a young, an intermediate, and an advanced soul, so an older soul, is to learn lessons. And the younger souls, the lessons will be simpler. So maybe a younger soul will need to learn just how it feels like to be in this physical realm. So maybe they'll choose a scenario that's simpler. They will maybe prefer to not want to put themselves in more complex situations. So they may choose a part of the world that's simpler, maybe a smaller town. They may choose to not move anywhere and to just be okay with being in that familiar environment. they may struggle to change as well. And this will be noticed especially in relationships where you'll see an older soul that has the capacity to evolve and to change and to grow, and a younger soul that isn't just ready to evolve or to grow and to self-develop. And so the younger soul is also going to be a little bit more stuck in the distractions of this physical world, which just means the materialism. So they may get really, really attached to anything that has to do with the materialism. So they may get really, really stuck into shopping, or they may get stuck into buying a fast car, or they may be really fascinated by buying a new cool big house. And there's nothing wrong with that, obviously. It is important to also understand that we're here also to appreciate all that the one creator has created. So to appreciate all that we see around us, and to fully appreciate the food we eat and the places we see, and to have a comfortable life. That is okay. That's obviously a beautiful thing. But a younger soul will identify more than appreciate the materialism. So they'll identify with a cool car because they think that people will think that they're cooler if they have a cool car. Or they'll identify with shopping because maybe they will feel more secure of themselves, and so instead of working on the security, they'll just masquerade with shopping. So it's more of an identification with the materialism rather than truly enjoying the materialism. So I'm gonna actually now get into the questions, so then I can sort of explain other parts that may be really important to understand. So the first question is, why can't I connect with my partner? Why do I have the ability to change while my partner doesn't? So this is a question I get very often. And so, as I mentioned, the gap of consciousness, so the level of the soul, is extremely important, especially in your relationship, because it is somebody that you interact with on a daily basis. And so if you have somebody who is just beginning their journey, so a younger soul, and then you have somebody who has experienced many lessons already, this may create a gap of consciousness, which will create also a gap of intimacy, where one soul will be more evolved than the other in regards to their soul having experienced more life than the other. So maybe this soul may be drawn more into the materialism, and that's why it's important, I think, that chemistry is also based off of the same level of consciousness. And this can be seen in many relationships. Be interested in more meaningful, profound conversations, while the younger soul may be more interested in conversations that are a little bit simpler. So they won't talk about life, or they won't talk about their reason of existence, while the older soul may be more aware and may question their existence a bit further and may seek more answers. So this creates the gap of consciousness. And I think this is the most important part in order to consider in a relationship, in a partnership, just because I think that that's what creates the chemistry. And so I also think that that's also the reason why that profound connection comes, where you're actually connecting with somebody's soul, and the soul has to be of that same level, as I mentioned. Second question is, could my struggle to connect with others have to do with the age of the soul? Yes, as I mentioned prior, the people that you connect with most will probably be at your same level of consciousness. The only thing is, the more you're of an older soul, so the more you've evolved, the more you've experienced and learned lessons throughout your incarnations, the more it's going to be harder to meet people at that same level, because it's sort of like a pyramid where on the bottom part you have all the younger souls, and then once you begin to go higher, it starts becoming a little bit harder to meet people who are older souls. So another question is there limit to the age of the soul? For example, person learned all the soul lessons, so can a soul have learned all their lessons? No, a soul will always, the reason of existence, so the purpose of why they choose to come down in this planet Earth is to learn lessons. So if they've learned all their lessons, there wouldn't be point of existence, which means all souls will need to learn some type of lesson, and it just depends on if it's a simpler lesson, a more complex lesson. So maybe a young soul may need to just learn what it feels like to provide for themselves, and then an older soul may need to learn the lesson of patience or of compassion, understanding. The only difference, as I mentioned, is a wander, which is a soul of a higher density. So instead of being a soul of a third density level of consciousness, which is where we are currently on planet Earth, wanders in a sixth density level of consciousness, which means they choose to come down to third density mainly to raise consciousness and to help others on their journey. So they may feel a little bit wiser. They also may not connect with the people around them so easily, and they may feel this feeling of alienation too, just because their level of frequency is much higher than the souls around them, which means it may be easier for them to integrate certain lessons. And that's okay, because that's the main reason why they choose to come down here. But they're still learning lessons just like everybody else. It's just easier for them to learn the lessons. Does that mean we lived more past lives, or we just learned more lessons in our past lives? So this question, I'm guessing, means just, does it have to do, so does you evolving to, let's just say, from a young soul to an older soul, how does it work? As I mentioned, there's two levels of beginner souls. The first one is those souls that just began to in this third density physical realm. And so they're just trying to get used to their surroundings. They're just trying to get used to being on this level of consciousness. And then there's a second level of beginner soul, which is actually that soul that keeps incarnating and does not learn the lesson, so has to keep incarnating to keep learning that same lesson. And so they still can get stuck. So a young soul may need to learn how to provide for themselves, for example, or they may need to learn how to just survive on planet Earth. And then there are those souls who maybe are as well younger souls, but they maybe learn that, and then they have to learn how to maybe not be jealous. So the lesson of not exhibiting jealous, and they continuously put themselves in scenarios where they're not learning that lesson. And so they have to choose again another incarnation until they learn that lessons. And they have a familiarity of their surroundings, so they're a little bit, maybe they seem a little bit like, okay, I've been in this physical realm more times than a younger soul, but I keep forgetting to learn the lesson that I was supposed to learn, and so I get stuck and I have to keep moving along in the same lesson until I learn it, if that makes sense. I'm gonna answer one last question, and then you guys can message all the questions you have. So the last question is, can my soul be older than my parents? Okay, that's a good question. So yes, it is actually probable that your soul will be older than your parents, just because the new generations are actually moving to a higher level of consciousness. So the old generations will actually be of younger souls, compared to these generations will be evolving to higher consciousness, which means their souls will have already learned many lessons and evolved to a higher level of consciousness. So yes, the chances are probably that eventually you will have to accept your parents for where they are on their journey and know that they're trying the best they can, and they have probably been the catalyst for you to learn many lessons and to suffer and, you know, to make life really hard, but then for you to then become your own person. I hope you enjoyed. I hope this was helpful in some way, and message me if you have any questions around the age of the soul. And also, yeah, just message me in regards to any questions.